The work again will go up. They'll have to disturb the driveway aprons as well as grass. And they'll be using our local contractors that we use in our consortium. So they'll let the Public Works Department control the quality of the repairs. I was fine with the meeting. I didn't realize to the extent of what the overall phase 2 of this improvement was all about until we met with them. But they're subcontracting to a firm in New Hampshire that's had, they've actually set up an office in Tewksbury. They pretty much have all of the North Shore, northeast area of Boston, north of Boston under contract. So we're not dealing with someone that's new. They're well versed in what they're doing, their methodologies and repairs and so forth. We've been very happy with in their presentation. The procedure will be, there's nothing new in terms of above ground. There'll be replacements of cabinets, but nothing new that the board has to address for permitting. It's really street opening permits. We're going to require one general application and have a surety bond attached to that application, and then each street will have a street opening permit with the normal $100, $100 charge to it.
Now these boxes, are they tied into this program?
Yes, they are.
So I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels. I'd like to get an answer on what they're going to do with the placement of these boxes. They put them at the end of people's driveways instead of putting them up on the pole.
All those boxes, they assured us, will go up the pole. Every one of them. They will not.
Are they doing in conjunction with this program? Are they there?
Pardon?
Can we have a linkage here of what they're doing?
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have that linkage. We just assume at the meeting that issue would be resolved ongoing with this plan, because they said that they were committed to addressing those relocations of those boxes.
With the street openings, make it?
We can do that, absolutely.
Dave, does this imply they're actually putting the fiber underground
Yes.
between each pole?
Yeah.
Instead of stringing the fiber because there's no more room on the poles, or?
Yeah, and they don't have the duct work. See, the newer subdivisions have ducts, so all they have to do is pull from the poles through. They're all underground.
Right.
But
so they're basically burying this fiber, bringing it up to the pole so that then they can run
there you go.
coax into the.
There you go. Right.
It's to protect the wire. Because not enough room.
There's also a practical.
So it's, the services, the town is an overall benefit. It's just the control of this fairly shotgun approach, if you will, to, they're going to be in here in fairly good forces moving this project along.
When do they expect to start?
They expect to start at the end of this month. We'll shut them down. They'll be shut down once the plant's shut down for paving, and they'll pick up in the spring.
When will they be looking for the vote?
The end of the month.
At our next meeting?
They won't need anything from the Board of Selectmen. So we will make sure that their completion of raising the boxes is associated with this, granting the overall application.
Or sooner.
Oh, I heard the message. I heard the message from the board.
Anything else, Mr. Hanlon? Anything else for Mr. Hanlon?
I'm all set.
Okay. I think I covered any potential old and new business earlier, so now we just have the message from the school committee. The superintendent came tonight to inform that of us, but I didn't want to hold up Mr. Hanlon with this discussion, nor did I want to hold up the superintendent on the night before the first day of school. So I talked with him, and he put in writing for me the motions of the school committee, so I will tell what those are. They're meeting tonight. The first motion was to petition the Board of Selectmen to include an article on the October town meeting warrant to request additional funds to complete the Batchelder School project, and that was voted unanimously. A second motion, the school committee requests of the Board of Selectmen that if determined to be legally appropriate, and I will explain that after I read this, I guess, that if determined to be legally appropriate, to only place an article on the October town meeting to request additional funds to complete the Batchelder School project and not to hold a special ballot election. And that was voted by the school committee by a 3-2 vote, with Mrs. Davis and Mr. Webster voting no. The school committee will submit requests in writing and meet with the Board of Selectmen on Monday, September 13th, to provide additional information about the escalation in costs and the need for additional funds, and provide an estimate of the additional money needed. Just to go back to the second motion, legally appropriate, there was a question as to whether town meeting could increase the amount of the debt exclusion, or a ballot was needed as well. Mr. Younger attempted to clarify that with council. Unfortunately, council was unable to clarify that today because they need to talk with the Department of Revenue, because there is, and jump in Mr. Younger if I misunderstood something, there is a potential recent, I guess, directive from the Department of Revenue that may say, and again, unfortunately, council couldn't get clarification from the DOR, that if the amount of the debt exclusion increases by more than 10%, you need to go to the ballot. If it's less than 10%, you can do it at
Generally,
town meeting. Is that?
I'm sorry to jump in. Technically, it's not necessarily we're 10%, but more than, I think, de minimis increases, such as one of the issues was that, are you changing the project, i.e. going from, let's say, 4 classrooms to 5 classrooms for the project? That would require a change in the ballot. That doesn't seem to be the issue here. The issue is that there's escalation costs for the project. That may, DOR may allow that to go through. The fact is that the costs are minimal. I think at least could be probably $2 million, which is greater than 10% of the money appropriated.
Right, the minimum bid, they received 7 bids. The minimum bid was approximately $2 million over what was allocated. That does not mean that it was $2 million over $15.7 million, because that's the entire project budget. They were targeting about, I believe it was about $12,900,000 for the construction bids, and it was about $2 million above that, 1.8 to 2 million. The next bid was about 900,000 above that. 5 of them were bunched in the middle. I gave out that information tonight. I attended the elementary school building committee last Thursday night where they talked about this. One was high and one was low. The elementary school building committee at that meeting, it was actually surprisingly a very short meeting, because it was quickly decided that the project could not be cut by that amount and that they would need to ask for additional funding. Obviously, we need to hear from council, because our first obligation is to do what we're legally required to do. After we find out what we are or we aren't, then it's in our purview to take it from there. This is not on the agenda tonight. I don't know if we want to have any discussion on it at this time. Next Monday is the last date on which something can be entered into on the warrant. I would recommend that we have a public hearing. We will have the wording of the article before then, and I would recommend that we have a public hearing on the article next Monday night, along with the rest of the articles that we were doing we were going to do the non-financial articles, and that happen to accommodate as many people as would like to come in the large group room at the middle school at 7:30 on Monday. I was also going to recommend that we maybe start ourselves at 7 o'clock so that we can perhaps do some of the other briefer articles and get those out of the way. We did have a public hearing scheduled for to review the request for proposals and hold a public hearing on the cell tower. Obviously, being that this is going to be an issue of wide interest to the community, Mr. Younger and I thought that it best to postpone that till September 20th, so as not to mix apples and oranges or cell towers and school buildings, if you will. So we will postpone that for a week. I know that that's critical that we get it done, but, yeah.
I would have difficulty with 7, as opposed to 7:30. If you want to start without me, that's fine.
What about the rest of the board? We wouldn't be discussing this. The school committee can't make it till 7:30. So we would be doing, some of the other more routine, and I thought that would help us from having a very late night. I need to get permission for 7 o'clock myself, but I'll assume it's okay.
I would also like to recommend that either the liaison, which I'm not sure if it's you or not, with Brad Jones's office, or the town administrator, to see if we can get an update on the SBAB program that we had been informed about back, I guess it's been a couple months now.
Yeah, I believe Jerry Venezia was actually going to invite him. That was set at the elementary school.
Oh, it was? Okay, I think it'd be a good idea to hear,
Yeah.
if that, the number they were using before was 40% reimbursement, so if that's close to being a reality, I think that would also shed light onto the actual numbers that are going to be, or the dollars that are going to be spent.
Other discussions?
I
Is
guess
there-
what I can report is I've got a few calls from people beckoning to
I
consider.
hear you, Bob, Rob.
I'm sorry. I've got a few calls regarding citizens that want the board to require that we put it on a
This
town
happens on
meeting
TV too, isn't it?
article. Want it to go to
A ballot.
ballot question. So I'm sure there's going to be a good turnout.
Mrs. McMullen?
I just have a question, does that $2 million, the estimate that they're over, include the 950,000?
Yes. The sub-bids, the 940.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I also had a number of people approach me as to what can be done, how, what's the board gonna do, what's the school committee gonna do, and so on and so forth. Obviously, this is all going to unfold rather quickly. The timetable involved, and we have students going to be housed out of town for a couple of years, hopefully that won't be delayed. But it depends, again, $2 to $3 million is a substantial amount of money over and above before we put a shovel in the ground. One of the first questions I have is, why were the estimates so far off? I know we got an article that, everybody's getting second guess, but I mean, it's a substantial amount of money to be off when we're estimating. And I don't know who's accountable for it. And I think that's going to have to be answered. I don't know if the answer is satisfactory, but answered anyway as far as at least in everybody's effort to maintain some level of public confidence in moving forward with the project and costs that were going to be incurred and contingencies that were involved or not involved. And, a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered going forward if we're going to keep this online and on pace with the time schedule. As far as the ballot question, again, a number of people thought that it was substantial enough that it should go back to the ballot for consideration. I haven't truly made up my mind yet. Part of me says yes, part of me says we have to try and keep the project on track too. We're going to get the students back in town. Because my guess is if we go to a ballot question, that's going to delay probably another year. These families being displaced. But in the long term, it might be wise to do it. Again, I have not come to a conclusion yet, and I'm really wrestling with it personally because I'm extremely disturbed by the numbers that we've seen thus far. I'm not terribly surprised, I guess, just because I've been so close to it for so long, but I anticipated it, and when I see it in hard print, it really disturbs me that we're at this point, and our already $2 million in the hole. Just extremely disappointed, frustrated, and we will come to some conclusion very quickly, see what we have to do.
Yeah, this is all unfolded rather quickly as the bids came in last Thursday, and then, of course, we had the long holiday weekend. There are a lot of things that need to fall into place. For example, the bids expire in 30 days, so we would have to be granted an extension, even if it was approved only at town meeting. We need, you know, an extension of the bids for at least a couple days, you know, right then and there. You know, I think representatives from the elementary school building committee and the school committee will be there Monday, so that you can ask your questions, so that other residents can ask your questions. We're in between one of the biggest rocks and hard places that I've probably ever seen, and I understand, you know, kids will be starting school in Stoneham tomorrow, and we want them to be here in North Reading. They deserve to be here in North Reading as soon as possible. But then again, the people voted on this, the people at a ballot, and I can understand the argument that the people should have the right to vote again. So like you.
And the other important point to be made, and we spoke with the town clerk earlier this evening, is it cannot make the November ballot.
Right.
By state law, it had to be submitted by the first week of August. That deadline has passed, so if we are going to go to a ballot question, and if that's the option, if the board chooses to do it would have to be some sort of a special election.
Right.
It
Oh, I'm
actually
sorry.
could be sooner though, right?
No. Yeah, I'm sorry, here, I thought everyone had a copy, but
I
here's
don't
one.
have a copy of the timetable.
Yeah, the earliest it can be is Tuesday, November 16th for an election, a special election. I'm sorry, I thought that was just my copy there, but it was all.
So I mean, and that's if we took some action, well, by the 1st of October.
So
First week of October.
then given that, there's the hurdle of extending the bids.
Right.
And, you know, it sets the program back, and you probably don't have to slip too much to find the kids in Stoneham for another year.
6
Yeah,
months to a year.
and I don't think extending the bids, from what I understood from the architect at the elementary school building committee meeting last week, I don't think that the bids can be extended to November 17th. I think it's possible that they could be extended to October 6th or 10th. You know, from what I understood, that it's law that the contract has to be signed in 30 days if the contractor, out of the, you know, goodness of their heart, wants to agree. Do you have information other than that, Mrs.
They
Swan?
discussed that tonight at the school
Yeah.
committee meeting, and that what they did, they were not required to sign it within 30 days.
They are not required to sign
Yes,
it.
that's what they stated at the school
Okay,
committee.
when are they required to sign? Or there was,
Well, they discussed the fact that you can't sign a contract without the appropriation to fund it.
right, they can't, right, but that they,
That they could, they still don't have an answer from the low bidder on the extension
Right.
of the 30 days. The question was asked about extension beyond 30 days to include a special election, and the answer was, we don't know, it's possible.
okay. The longer you go, though, the less possible, probably.
I think part of that depends on how bad the contractor wants the
Yeah.
job to.
Well, that's the other thing too, when you look at the numbers that you provided us this evening, I mean, the low bidder, the general contractor, was almost $1 million, $900,000 less than the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth bidders, who were all pretty much bunched together. And my understanding is that some of the subcontractors, bonding insurance companies, told them that they.
Yeah, the low bidder on the roof was
Low
already
bidder on
denied.
a couple of the subcontractors were already pretty much disqualified themselves, or were disqualified
Yeah,
from
I
the
think
bond.
the electrical, and the
And,
electrical, yeah.
You know, I would be concerned that the general contractors could be in the same situation and may find himself looking at these other numbers and saying, you know, maybe I goofed.
Or they-
And one way of getting out of that is not to allow for the extension, walk away and run away or back. We're back to another $1 million.
Yeah.
Potentially
Another $1 million on top of the two. So it's,
We have more questions than answers. I think what's obvious is that there's gonna have to be a warrant article. What it's gonna say
Well,
will not be
maybe,
decided tonight.
maybe a bigger question is, what's the dollar amount that needs to be put on the warrant article?
Well, that needs to be in the
But,
motion.
one thing that I think we should consider as a board is maybe, consideration of two, and I don't know if we can tie it together or not. Is one just a simple warrant article appropriating more money, which if Department of Revenue says it's okay, and we can do that because we're not changing the scope, just the bids came in higher. And the other one is to make the appropriation by town meeting subject to ballot approval. So we can still take action
If we
until the
don't
town
hear,
meeting,
yeah.
and then make it subject to ballot approval. Make it a two-step process. It's going to be $2 or $3 million over. That's a substantial amount on this project, or on any project for that matter. Again, we talked about the police station situation. We don't know until that comes in either where we're going to be.
Mr. Vino and then Ms. Mullin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was contacted by two people on this issue so far, and both have asked me to put it to a ballot question. I have not made my final decision on that yet, and I told both these people that. I think I would like to know first if it can legally be done at town meeting. Do we know when we'd have that answer, Mr. Young?
They were working on it this afternoon, and,
So it would be within a day or two.
oh,
They've
it
been
would
told
definitely be,
ASAP.
But I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
we'll know within a day.
I think I'd like to hold my decision on this until I know that, until I have that answer. And I know, you talk about frustration, Mr. O'Leary. I'm not only frustrated about the cost, and I know the train has left the station, but we could have had children in the Swan Pond School last September. So you talk about frustration. I have frustration, but I don't see that ever happening, and I know we have to move forward, and I'm willing to, but I'm just not sure in what direction yet on this.
Yep, obviously. Seems that the majority of us are not, we'll reserve judgment tonight, and it's,
But I think we should have a couple of warrant articles prepared for the board to be acted on. Again, depending on what the Department of Revenue says, the question may be moot, they may decide it for us, may have to go to
we'll
ballot.
do.
But if they say we can do it, we'll send it to the board to decide whether or not we want to have a two-step.
I will keep the board closely informed this week of that. Advise you. Mrs. Mullen.
If we go to a ballot, can we put Swan Pond and the batch back on? But I think when we all voted a billion years ago, that we, knew what the numbers were and what was thrown out, and the batch was less expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And I think with all the things that we know now, I'd like to have Swan Pond back on there. And I think it's a bigger, better school when we're done versus the cost of this.
At what price?
I don't know, pick a number, just like they did.
Well, I think the elementary school building
I
committee.
don't know, I don't know, I'm saying,
I think the elementary school building committee is gonna be talking about that.
I assume they are, and they've got the numbers from the.
And if they, need to escalate the numbers or, feel that they need to go, it's up to them, feel that they need to get it, estimated again, perhaps they'll visit the finance committee to update that, if that seems to be,
Is there a need for a warrant article for October town meeting appropriate money to get those numbers updated? I mean, at this point.
let's
yeah,
have
if-
lots and lots of.
No, I know, but the thing is, at this point, if we're going to, if we have to go this route and something that's to be considered, they were already operating, the elementary school building committee was already operating on a very tight time frame as far as putting this out to bid, getting the ground broken and going on, in order to have the kids back in a 2-year time frame. A slip up like this could very well set that back 6 months to a year anyway, but let's hope not. But if that's the case, then it might be worth taking another look at it. And who knows, for $20 million, if this is what this whole thing's going to end up at, you may be able to get a new elementary school at Swan Pond and renovate the bachelor school for other uses like school administration, as we talked about before, and there's a whole host of ideas. But it's still a little premature, but it's still very much alive out there. It's very much, the buzz out there is Everything we're starting to allude to this evening, and I've spoken to more than 2 people over this weekend, since there were hundreds of them there. You know, I was a captive audience at the grill, and people coming up, approaching me and talking with a lot of people on the sidelines. The word is getting out quickly, obviously, that there's a problem. And what are we going to do about it?
Mrs. Colella, and then Mr. Kelly, and then Mrs. McCollum.
There was some discussion at the school committee meeting tonight about Swan Pond. There was also some discussion, I believe, I was told after, about the possibility of them going to FinCom and asking for a transfer to get them the numbers on Swan Pond. And I don't know any more than that, but I guess I was one of the 2 people that called Mr. Vino, and I'll save myself 4 other telephone calls, because I will stand up at your public hearing next Monday night, and as forcefully as I can put it, request that you put it on a ballot. This is not a couple of $100,000. This is several $1 million, and I want you all to think about it, because let the people speak has been uttered in this town how many times in the last couple of years. Let the people speak. They voted, yes, they voted on $15.7 million. This is no longer $15.7 million, and it is terribly unfair to the people in this town who supposedly can't afford to pay for their trash to be picked up, to have $2 or $3 million dumped on their tax rate without their approval. So I'm asking each and every one of you to consider that before next Monday night, because it will be asked again. And I've already asked it at the school committee meeting, which prompted their second vote of 3-2. And I'm asking you, and I will ask it again publicly next Monday night.
Thank you, Mrs. Colella. I think we're all thinking about that.
We anticipated the question.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, I think before we all go flying off the handle with this, if reimbursement comes, it's going to cost less than $15.7 million to the taxpayers. So hopefully that's what we're going to learn from Representative Jones. And if that's the case, the $2 million more would still, out of pocket to the taxpayers, be less than the original 15.8 that they voted for, and keep things on their timetable and have the children back in North Reading in 2 years. So I agree. The numbers need to be explored. However, if it's at the expense of derailing the project which is going to, in effect, cause the children to be out of town an additional year or more, then I would say I would rather get the information first about reimbursement before we did anything that, for whatever reason, political, economical, whatever, that we kind of derail the project that's already been approved by the voters when they did speak.
Could I just follow up on that, Mrs. Davis?
Well, I was going to recognize Ms. Briefly.
Briefly. On the question of reimbursement, it's a wonderful idea to have Mr. Jones Jr. come in and talk to the town of North Reading about what is included in that legislation. Mr. Jones cannot answer the question of whether that building is even reimbursable, if it's an approvable project or not. He cannot answer that question. The school committee has not even contacted the Department of Education about that project, and they said that tonight in public. Mr. Jones cannot answer that question. That is misleading.
Mrs. McCollum?
I just have a simple question. Madam Chairperson, you spoke that we wouldn't be able to have a special ballot election until November 17th.
16.
Isn't it within 45 days of the warrant article, not after 45 days of the warrant article, is it? Am I wrong here? If the warrant article is approved at town meeting on Monday night, you're supposed to hold the special town meeting within 45 days,
Right.
special ballot.
That is within 45 days. We have a whole schedule, and I can share with one here prepared by Barbara Stutz. We do have the
Oh,
president.
so Barbara is saying that the first day that she could
Yes.
bring it to a ballot,
Yes.
did she say why?
Well, for.
Because I mean,
there's the
that's
federal-
45
It's
days
within,
out.
and that is within 45 days, and she has the federal election in between. She has dates that, need to be, there's voter registration deadlines, all the,
Voter
benchmark.
registration deadlines for a special,
yeah, for
Not
a
election.
special election.
Any election.
Yeah, and it's too late. Mr. O'Leary asked her specifically today, could we piggyback onto the federal election the first Tuesday in November? And her answer was
okay,
no.
so that would delay the project a month.
It is not legally.
So that would delay the project basically just about a month.
Unless,
Because you'd still have plenty of time to break ground and do what you need to do.
as long as the bids, the
Right.
caveat really being is that the bid is still good and the contract could be signed on November 17th. If all the bids expire and they have to go back,
I mean, I just want something to happen here. This has been so long and dragged out. And I can only say, as a resident of North Reading, that I am so glad that I only have one more year to deal with the elementary schools, because otherwise I would strongly be considering pulling my son out and putting him in private school, and I don't want to do that because I went to private school and I hated it. I hated it. I always wanted to go with my friends on my street. But anyway, if we did revisit Swan Pond, it's my understanding from discussions with the architect for Swan Pond, throughout the many years we dealt on that it would not be a 2-year project, that it could be done within 18 months. So, you talk about delaying the project, if you bring both back to the voters for a decision, it could be very simply that Swan Pond can be built a lot quicker than we can renovate an old school. So, I mean, I know there are site issues, but there are gonna be lots of issues when they start tearing that building down, too.
well,
Thank you.
I saw, are you still seeking recognition, Mrs. Roebuck?
My only concern, Madam Chairman, is and it's not really a Board of Selectmen's issue, but if you're talking about possible cost overruns, the $400,000 that currently is budgeted for contingency is way, way below what it should be. It was initially supposed to be 7% contingency. Most communities around here have a 10% contingency. The swing space expenses, my understanding is, were taken out of the contingency or will be taken out. So you have very little fallback position if anything happens in the next couple of years with the batch scope. And as I said, not a selectmen's issue, but it certainly is something to question.
And it was, you were at the elementary school building committee last Thursday night, and one of the members there brought up, if the entire budget is going up and the contingency is traditionally a percentage of the budget, doesn't it make sense that rise in proportion? And that is something that they will be looking at, and I agree with you that you don't increase the price of the project and then assume the same contingency, because then you would just
Well,
fix.
that's already a decreased contingency.
Yeah, so I think, the amount does not need to be set in the warrant article. It needs to be set in the motion at town meeting, which fortunately is a tremendously compressed time schedule, but buys a couple of more weeks to determine what that's going to be. If the bids expire, if it's deemed that the contract can't be signed, then the amount, would have to, I think, be much greater, because we don't want to end up going through this process and then find out we're short again. Mr. Messeri.
And you also have the delay, any delay in the project is gonna add cost associated with housing of the students too, so that's gotta be considered as part of
That actually ends up being one of the cheaper,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe.
Mrs. Mullen, Mrs. McMullen, Mrs. Mullen, you have to.
Oh, and our new secretary is, what's her name? Mullen, or I can't remember.
Separate yourself.
Mac Mullen.
On the extra 2 million
Read
that
it.
came in, thank you, on the extra 2 million that came in, does that still not include the kitchen item within the?
No, it's not including that.
No, though, if you compare kind of apples to apples, and it's like, it's between 1.8 and 2 million, but the base bid did not include the ad alternates, which are worth $215,000, and that's the projection screens, the acoustical wall treatments to keep down the sound, kitchen equipment, backstops, and a chiller.
I guess the thing I'm saying is, there's been so much emotion in this for so many years, that everybody is still saying, let's just get it done, let's get it done. And I think that we really have to ask everybody to stop and step outside the box and look back in. If you had a chance to do this and you knew these numbers 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, would we have voted for it? And I don't think it's too late. We haven't started. And to relocate the kids for 1 more year, it's going to affect all of us. It doesn't matter if we drive to Stoneham or our kids going an extra hour later. It's affecting everybody in town. That for the life of the building, it's going to be better for the next 30 years, 40 years for the other kids to wind up rushing it for 1 year to get a smaller building without as many things in it. I just think is wrong. And if the selectmen and school committee choose not to put it on, to go to ballot, could a citizen's petition make it go to ballot?
A citizen's petition can call a special town meeting. I believe that only the selectmen can call a ballot question.
Which raises a question. I was under the impression that you could do the prop override, take it to a ballot question first, and then go to town meeting. So what would prevent us, if we so chose, and I'm not suggesting that we're even ready to do that, to create and put a ballot question on now, rather than wait until October town meeting and pushing it out? Maybe there's time then to get it on the November ballot.
It can't go on the November ballot.
Can't, period, because that's closed. Okay.
No, I mean, you could do the ballot. We'd have to talk to Mrs. Stats because, the timing, it probably would run right up against the presidential election now and her capability of handling that. Could you, if there wasn't a presidential election yet, you could do it that way, and a lot of towns do it that way. I would say that the amount is set at town meeting, so you would still, when people are voting at the ballot, I think they still need to have some pretty good idea of the dollar amount that then's going to follow up at town meeting. A lot of towns.
I was thinking that if you set the ballot question in such a way that it actually took place after town meeting, but we moved to put it on a ballot question and hold a special town meeting in the appropriate time frame from the time we make that decision. You could go to town meeting, set the amount, and then have the ballot question with the appropriate language to approve it. Just a thought.
Yeah, there are.
The other thing is, what if you put both on and they reject both of the votes?
What if you put the batch on and they reject that?
That's what I'm saying. Where are you then?
You're the same place you are if you put just one on, they vote.
You're the same. Yeah, you're the same place.
But at least you're giving the people a chance to say, put the X amount of dollars to each one, and say which
No,
would
we
you
need
rather have.
we need an update on the figures for Swan Pond in order to do that.
I mean, we could, if this fails, if this even fails, the discussion at the elementary school building committee is that we're in desperate trouble. They can't value engineer this much money out of the building. You would have an elementary school building that probably is not reimbursable. But definitely, let's put it that way, definitely is not reimbursable because it doesn't meet program needs and ed specs if you take $2 million out of the project. Right there.
I just have a quick request. I would request of the selectmen to please request, not that it means much, of the school committee, if we could possibly get an update from the architect as to Swan Pond. I'd like an update on the figures for Swan Pond so that we know, if we're talking about putting two things on a ballot now, I think we need both figures clear and out there on what you're getting for what and what you're getting for the other.
Did you request that of the school committee?
It was discussed tonight.
I was in my own meeting, recreation, so I wasn't there. I'm going to try to be there Monday night, but I don't know if I can yet.
Thank you for the information.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the elementary school building, to answer a question.
Do they have any money left?
Answer. They're meeting Thursday night, and I was told by their chairman that they will be discussing Swan Pond because it would be,
Mr. DeSimone?
yes, it would be irresponsible not to, and because the question is going to come up. I would suggest that that is probably,
The meeting this Thursday.
yes, that is probably the forum. You know, it doesn't have to come up from the line to us, but that is the forum. This, you know, I personally have always believed that the school committee manages schools and has to live within the results of whatever the solution, the ultimate solution to this ever is. It would be preferable if it came up the line that way, and I think that that would be a good place, to start. Okay, it had to be said. I know we have an ad in the paper tomorrow, and I apologize for the last minute nature beyond our control. We will have a public hearing, and if you could coordinate with Mr. Torres and make sure it gets in. We'll have a public hearing in the large group room at the middle school on Monday night. It will begin at 7 o'clock. In moderating that meeting, I'll do our best to get through as many articles as we can. Maybe we could do the other citizens petitions first, so folks who don't want to be there for the elementary school building discussion can get their business done and leave, and we'll do that, and then we'll stay after and finish up.
Is that room available?
The superintendent said he would absolutely make it available. I spoke with him. I thought we needed a bigger room. He said that whoever there, so whoever out there, if you're in the room next Monday night, you're preempted. But this is very serious. With all seriousness, this is probably one of the most disappointing, difficult decisions that we will have to make. Okay, anything else? We do have executive session. Oh, and I'd like to wish everyone a great first day of school tomorrow. And you should all be in bed if you're watching. Yeah, you should all be in bed if you're watching.
See how that goes.
We're going to go into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiation at Mr. Vino's request.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, it is. Madam Chairman, I move to enter into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations and a return to open session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Second.
Motion and second, roll call vote, Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Misery.
Aye.
Mr. Callagy.
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Vino. And the chair votes aye. Thank you.